Hey guys, if you don't know me, my name's Joel. Wherever you're watching in the world, thank you for clicking on this video. It's probably like one or two people, but thank you for clicking. Uh, I'd like to share a little bit of my story, and what I'm doing here today is I'm sharing my testimony. I'd like people to understand, whoever's watching this around the world, wherever you're watching, um, who Jesus really is. And I can't show you that, but I hope God will use my story to soften your heart so you can understand who Jesus really is. Because I know a lot of people out there will tell you religion and Jesus, the Bible, it's all a book. It's just a book, um, and it's nothing more than that. But I'm here to say that Jesus is real, he's alive, and he's working. And I pray that God would use me. As much as I'm not experienced in this, I'm not an experienced speaker, I'm not an experienced anything, video editor, none of this. Right now, I literally have Legos holding on my phone. I have a mic in my hand that I got off of Amazon for like $20. So this is really rinky dink, but I really think that God can use my story to um, touch somebody that experienced the same thing that I went through. And I'm not talking about any physical thing that I went through. I'm talking about something deep down in your heart, a longing for love, um, that you can't find in anything. And I really pray that God would use me to speak to somebody else that's watching this video. So whoever you are, thank you for watching. So we're gonna get going. Let's begin. Okay, now this is the part of the testimony where a lot of people will mentally clock out. They're gone because I'm going to begin it because this is truth. I have to say it is I was raised in a Christian household. Okay, I admit it. Great. This is a lot of Christian testimonies. They start with that. I was raised in a Christian household, but that's not a reason to completely disregard the testimony because I promise I was not a complete Christian in belief anyway. I was a cultural Christian, like some atheists claim, a cultural Christian, where you do all the church things, you do all the Christmas things, you pray and blah 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 blah. But it didn't really change my heart, not until recently, anyway. Um, and that's why I'm here to share, because Jesus changed my life truly. But I was raised in a Christian home, like I said. I was. There's a lot of kids that were raised this way. They go to church on Sunday, and if you're me, you were in church on Sunday being completely bored. You did not care about anything the preacher was saying. I would be drawing and spinning and looking up and groaning like, oh, get me out of here. And I'm sure plenty of people, even not kids, normal people, you probably experience this. You go to church just because it's Christmas or it's Easter and you're like, I don't care about this. Why am I here? I guess I'm here because it's a nice thing. It's a nice thing to do. Blah 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 blah. There's nothing here for me. Um, but I trusted Jesus existed. I trusted God existed. Um, when I was 11, I was baptized, right? Um, and people don't understand, if you don't have a heart change to connect with Jesus, nothing's going to happen. You're going to keep living your life, and that's what happened to me. I even transferred to a Christian school around this time. I was about 11 years old. Like I said, I transferred to a Christian school from a public school, and every week at chapel or any kind of special event, guess what was going on? Raising my hand, praising God, loving God. Look at me, I'm great. I have such a deep relationship with God. This was not just middle school or elementary school, any of that. This was every kind of experience I had in my life. I would act like I was the most godly one, the most holy one around. But as I grew, like it, the the seed that my faith was built on really began to show. Like, it really began to show what it was truly built on. the world really began to grab a hold of me. And that's what I'll begin to talk about here in a second. To an outsider or whoever saw me around this time, you'd probably say I was a Christian because I did what normal Christians do. Normal, I mean modern, everyday, cultural Christians. We'd pray before meals, go to church on Sunday, but guess what? The way I lived did not change a bit. Like Jesus and Christianity was a set of rules to me, uh, and that's the way I live my life. When you don't connect to it in a certain way, you won't live the life of a Christian. That's not how it works. I'll never forget this. One day, it was around middle school, I'd say. We had a bunch of my friends over, right? Um, so we were playing games, video games, tackling each other, blah 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 blah. But all of a sudden, one of them pulled me to the side and said, "Are you really a Christian? Like, do you really believe that God exists?" Guess what? I flat out told him, "No, I don't believe any of that. Of course I don't. It's stupid." Like, you could say that was because of peer pressure, but really, I knew I did not fully trust in it because my life didn't change. If I really trusted in Jesus, my life would change. It it didn't. Like, even though I was young, I was probably around 12 or 13 at this point. I didn't care. Like, I'd deny him if I had pressure on me, I'd deny him. I don't care. I'd straight up deny him. No problem for me. And anybody else out there who's raised in a religious household, uh, I carried that guilt with me for years and years and years, um, because Christianity to me was nothing more than a rule book. It tells you what to do. You're wrong. This is right. Nothing else. There's no relationship involved. At least that's what my heart believed. Like, I knew it with my head. I had a relationship, but I didn't connect it to my heart at all. Um, and I just thought it was about memorizing verses, learning the stories, maybe taking something here and there, sprinkling it here, maybe apply it to your life. But now, going into high school, I had all the head knowledge about Christianity you could ask for. Like, we studied the Bible every day in school. We learned about every single book all the time. With every book in the Bible, I knew, memorizing all kinds of verses. You ask me any kind of thing about the Bible, I'd know it. But it was a textbook to me. You learn it in school, and I don't apply it to my life. I looked like any other kid in my school, and I'm not saying this to degrade any other person that was in my school because there was some great Christ followers in my school. They really shone out as lights to me, even though I didn't I didn't follow Christ when I was in high school. Um, there was some really great people there, but as for me and a good amount of people in my school, um, we didn't really trust in Christ or anything like that because guess what? We acted like everybody else around the world in a public school. We'd be making fun of people. Uh, I'd be making fun of people, crew joking with people, um, uh, going home and doing stuff I'll talk about later, and being a complete people pleaser. I was literally a chameleon. Like, I would I would act one way in front of my parents just to satisfy them and make them think I was such a good boy, such a great Christian child, getting straight A's. Look at me, I'm great. Uh, but this is how a good portion of Christians in my life acted. Like, there was a few bright shining lights in my life. I knew that was the right way to go, to trust in them, but I didn't listen. I I trusted the people that gave me the satisfaction now, like the satisfaction that I wanted now. That's the people that I listened to, and they trusted in the same things I did. So, which was the world, and I believe that would satisfy the hole in my heart. Um, I didn't think that following Jesus would really change my life at all because I thought I was following Jesus. This is how other people in my life acted. I knew it was wrong from all the stuff that I studied, but I completely ignored it because I was getting satisfied. I I loved the way I was living. and I don't want to change it. So I just I just kept living and telling other people I was a Christian, but deep down, no. I promise you, I was not. Um, this was around 2018, 2019. This is when my life really changed for the worst. I didn't understand what real love was. Um, I thought love was in porn, was in relationships, was in self validation, was in, you know, having praise from other people. And my head and my heart were completely disconnected. I was around 13, 14 around this time. And when I looked for love in those areas, that's when my life began to spiral completely downwards. And from day one of my relationship, I elevated that to number one. And you know what else was alongside it? Myself. I was alongside it because I believed what I knew and what I thought was best. I said, what I think is best. I don't care about what God's telling me to do. I'm going to do what I think is best, and that's going to work out. And if my ex didn't talk to me for even an hour, I was completely heartbroken and devastated. And as my relationship went on, it wasn't just an hour, I'll tell you that. It was longer than that. It became longer than that, but I won't get too deep into that. But that's when my dependence on porn really began to grow. Um, for anyone else who struggles with this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You keep going back to porn thinking it'll make you feel better, and it never does. You keep trying to fill that hole in your heart with porn, and it'll never fill it. Um, and I had a warped perception of how to combat my relationship problems, and I thought going to porn will fill the gap. Guess what? It didn't, and I kept going back to it. And the more I dug that hole, the more I kept falling into it. Um, I kept tripping, and every time every time I fell into the hole, I picked myself up. I'd think I pick myself up, I'll be fine. I just gotta figure it out, do some intellectual work, maybe learn from someone. I'll be able to figure it out. It'll be fine. And guess what? I kept falling down in the hole, and I kept trying to fill it up. I tried so many things. I'm not even gonna go into some of the things that I tried, but I tried to fill it up with everything that the world offered me because I thought what the world offered me was all there was. Um, I didn't experience anything that really would fill it up, so I thought all the world had to offer me was porn and seeking validation from other people. Um, and my relationship, of course, began to decline and go downhill. I thought the only way for my life to feel complete was if she was talking to me and loving on me. And even if she did, guess what? I was still deep in my porn addiction. And that hole in my heart was still there, even if she did start loving on me and caring about me, which she did at some points. But I still had that hole in my heart, and I didn't know what to do about it. My relationship got worse and worse, and I became an anxious overthinker about literally everything. I got so depressed when she didn't talk to me. Um, Later on, I used to drive to school and just cry and come home or be at school, tell everybody I'm okay, and then come home and cry. Because that's all I thought love was what I was experiencing in my life. Like that was the end of love. Like, is this really what life is about? This is all life is going to give me. Um, I knew something was wrong, but I turned a blind eye to what was right and what I should be doing in my life. And of course, as that went on, I began to blame myself for how I felt, and I kept putting my relationship on the pedestal as king, and as I blamed myself, I cycled deeper and deeper into the spiral that I was in, and it just had such a tight grasp on me that I didn't see any other way out. Anybody that went through this kind of addiction or any of these kind of things, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It'll grab hold of you, and Satan will grab you through anything that you think love is that's not Jesus. He'll grab you through it, and he'll keep grabbing you tighter and tighter and tighter until you can't take it anymore. And it's such a horrible thing, but many people are blinded because they think that's what love is, and they won't confront it, and they'll just keep doing it over and over. And that's how my life was. I did the same thing. So um this was all around 2020 mostly. I was in that cycle, and many people would say they blame God for putting them in that situation. But I really didn't blame God. I just thought he was there. Like, I believed him as a historical fact. Like, God was up there, Jesus died and all that. But what did that have to do with my life? You know, it had nothing to do with my life. At least that's what I thought. Um, like, people would say Jesus died to save me, and I'd be like, what does that mean? That means nothing for me. I don't care. No, my life is still horrible. So what's the point? It doesn't matter. And that's how I thought about Christianity at that point. And um, many people who are in that addiction and the search of looking for love are in the same kind of, you think you have so much guilt weighing down on you. And I had so much guilt weighing down on me, because if you're raised in a religious house, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You have that guilt of, you're not doing it right. You can't do it right. You're never gonna be able to satisfy God. God hates you, and that's what you believe because you didn't get the rules right. And in my heart, that's what I believed as well, because I was raised that way. Other people, whoever's there, whoever's listening to this, I'm sure if you were raised in a religious household, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That guilt that you feel when you don't live up to the expectations of the Bible or anything it says, you know the guilt that I'm talking about. And that's what I felt. Now, that part of my testimony, it can actually be summarized in what Jesus said. Jesus said it in a parable. Now, if you don't know what a parable is, it's like a short story that Jesus would talk about. And it would be really confusing to many people who were listening to it. So, for example, this parable I'm about to talk about is the parable of the sower. So Jesus says, a farmer went out to the field, cast out some seed. There was seed that was sown amongst thorns, and once it grew, it was trampled out and choked out. There was seed that was sown amongst rocks, and nothing happened to it. Seed that was sown on good soil, and something grew out great out of it. And many people around the time, the Pharisees and the people listening, would be like, Jesus, why are you telling these weird stories? What's the point? And then they just walk away and don't care to listen. But what Jesus was trying to tell the people through this is, ask me what the parable means, and I'll tell you. So whoever seeks and knocks, the door will be opened. That's what Jesus was trying to get to the people. So he answered them, and this is what he said. At least for the one that applied to me, this is the thorns. So the seed that was thrown amongst the thorns, this is the one that applies to me. Jesus explained this in verse 22. He says, what was sown amongst thorns, this is the one who hears the word, but the cares of the world and the deceitfulness of riches choke the word, and it proves unfruitful. Now, that's exactly what happened to me. Now, Jesus explained it, but that's only because someone cared enough to ask. They asked him, and Jesus explained it to him. But for me, I wasn't convinced about what Jesus was saying. I was convinced what Satan was saying. So the gospel was given to me, and guess what? It was choked out because I loved other things more than Jesus, more than the creator of the world, and that's what choked it out. Now, when I was convinced by what Satan told me, I believed whatever the world gives me is going to satisfy that desire for love that I have. Now, I know so many people in the world feel that exact same way. They believe that getting this amount of money, getting this relationship, getting this, getting that will fill that desire for love that they have. And guess what? It's not going to work out. For me, I tried to put on that mask and act like I was satisfied and happy with my life, but I wasn't. I wasn't. No matter how much I lied to myself, I wasn't. Now, around 2021, my life got flipped around again. And the reason I'm laughing is because this part of my testimony isn't something about, well, it is connected to my heart, but it's something that happened to me physically. But I shared this part of my testimony to act like this was the pivotal point in my spiritual journey. This is the part that I really paraded around like was the turning point in my spiritual journey. But it was a part of it, but it was not what Jesus used to connect me to him. So anyway, I was in Walmart and uh, my throat began to close up. My vision got narrowed and I almost passed out. I ran to go sit down, stumbled to go sit down, and the EMTs came. Long story short, I went to the hospital and guess what? Hit with cancer and leukemia. Now, for many people, that would be completely destructive because of what it could mean for your life. But for me, as it went on, the worst part of it for me at the time was it ruined my body image. Like, I prided myself on how I looked. And when I was under the chemo, I began to lose all my weight, lose all my abilities. Like, I was a boxer at this time, right? I didn't give context, but I was a boxer and I was in great shape. I looked great. That's what I thought. And that's what I prided myself. One of the many things I prided myself on. And now that I lost that, I was I was so depressed, and it wasn't just because I was in physical pain from the chemo and everything. It was because my spirits were completely destroyed. Everything that was going on before was still there, and this just added to it. But the only thing that really spoke to me through my cancer trials at the time, that really spoke to me, my my family and friends really showed up for me. My classmates made me a blanket and gave me all kinds of encouragement. Like, I really appreciate what they did for me. They really lifted my spirits at the time. And now I realize what God was saying to me through that, but really back then I only saw that my friends and family cared about me. To me back then, God was someone who gave me cancer. Why would I care about him? That's what I thought. I thought God gave me cancer. God did this to me. I don't care about him. So when I began to get healed, I went right back to everything that I was doing before. Like, I got my physical body back. I got everything back, but my heart still had that deep gaping hole in it. Like, I thought life would be greater, like, just cuz my cancer was gone, and it really wasn't. Like, I went back to school in 2022 and my insecurities and everything began to show again. I had to wear a wig because I didn't have any confidence about myself at the time. Before I got my shape back anyway, I wore a wig because I was embarrassed about the way I looked. I had no backing, I had no foundation to build my self-confidence at all. And of course, my relationship continued its cycle. There was a point where me and my girlfriend didn't talk for a month, and I completely broke down. Like, I didn't know what to do with my life because that was that was the rock I built my life on, was my relationship and the way I viewed love. And so now I graduated high school. Now I'm in college. Um, uh, I'm healed from cancer. Everything's gone. Praise God. That was amazing. But I I was so wrapped up in all those things at this point. I went back to everything. Everything I was doing, I was wrapped up in it because I still thought love was in that. Like, you'd think going through cancer would teach you something about your self image, but it really didn't. I built my entire foundation on these things, thinking if I just fix this one thing or if I fix this one problem, everything will be great. And guess what? You keep rolling into that and you never get anywhere. You keep doing that for the rest of your life. It's like Sisyphus trying to push that rock up the mountain. Guess what? You're just going to keep going for the rest of your life. Nothing's going to happen. Um, Nothing worked. I couldn't find any kind of true peace. Like, my heart was in such turmoil at this point. I didn't know what to do. Well, guess what? I turned everything. Let's go back to it. Let's do a little review here. My relationship, I turned to it. Didn't work. Porn didn't work. Myself, how I looked, didn't work. Other people giving me validation. Guess what? That doesn't last. Now, there's a proverb that I think really applies to the situation I was going through at this time. Like, I just came out of cancer, and you'd think that would be the experience that changed me, right? That'd be an experience that's life altering. Well, it was life altering in some ways. In this way, with the hole in my heart, it was not. I'll read this proverb. It's Proverbs 26:11. It says, "Like a dog that returns to its vomit is a fool who returns to his folly." Like, if that isn't me, I don't know what is. I shared a post of my story the other day. That's when this fool in Proverbs is starting to sound like you, and he was freaking out. And I'm like, dude, this is literally how I was at this time. Like, I kept returning to the same things that you'd think I'd change, and the things that you'd think I'd turn my back on. I went right back to it after I went through, like, some of the worst physical pain you can imagine. But I didn't know what else to turn to because in my heart, that's the only things I cared about. That's really why it ended up turning so bad, because I depended uh, on porn, my self image, pleasing other people, all that stuff. I depended on that instead of something that's never going to change and something that will always love me and care for me no matter what. And it's not myself. So when I built my whole foundation on all these things, and they all I finally started to see that none of them could provide me the satisfaction that and the desire of love that I was looking for. That's when my foundation really crumbled down. Like, I had nowhere else to turn to. I was really insecure to reach out to my friends and my family about my problems I was having. But if they asked me about it, boy, what I'd dump on them. I dumped like crazy on some of my friends. And if you're watching this, thank you so much for letting me do that. Uh, Even though I was going through so much turmoil at this time, like, uh, I just, I, I built it all up. It all built up into my heart, and even though I really appreciate what my friends did for me, listening to me when I was dumping at them and everything, I still I couldn't figure out a solution on my own. Like, I tried as hard as I could to figure it out by myself, and I how do I word this? The only thing that really worked was Jesus. Like, I don't know how else to describe it, but Jesus is the only one that filled that hole in my heart and gave me meaning, purpose, and validation. Like, no, you know what? He didn't give me validation. Jesus said, bro, You trusted in yourself. You need to trust in me. That's what Jesus is telling me. But I had nowhere else to turn. Like I didn't I didn't care about Jesus and I had nowhere else to look to. So I began to pray like I used to when I was little. Um, and I wanted to see if that would really help me. And guess what, guys? It didn't. I still was going through the same pain that I was going through, but I I didn't develop any kind of connection to God. But as all this was going on, I started to look at Jesus instead of any of that other stuff. Like I had nowhere else to look, so I began to look at Jesus. And when I started to look at Jesus, I started to look at and think about some of the other things that I used to do back in high school and stuff. Because I was in college at this point, and I hadn't done any biblical learning or anything besides church on Sunday, and that's it. So I turned back to apologetics, which is what I studied in high school, a decent amount, and I got really interested in it. It was strange. Like I began to be like, oh well, that makes sense. If there's a building, then that means there has to be a designer, and that's God. So I was building up uh, all these philosophical, ethical, moral, evidential, historical reasons for believing in Jesus, and I could go on about that all day. I have so much things that I've learned recently by getting back into that, but that's not the point. When I started to do that, I realized, and like logically, it makes sense that all of this stuff happened. Jesus died, he was buried, but he resurrected, not just as a historical fact. He did it, and he suffered so much pain, and he did that so that I may be free, not just the world in general. He left the 99 to come for me, someone who didn't care a lick about him, didn't want to spend any time with him unless I was forced to or I thought it would look better on me. Um, God really worked through my heart um, when I was at my lowest point. He showed me like it wasn't head knowledge this time. It began to connect with my heart and in a way that I can't really explain. Like God showed me that through all creation, like I've seen so many beautiful places in my life. I've seen so many intricate things. I thought about how God created every single detail in this world, like every single hair on my head, every planet, every star, but not just those distant things. He created me, and he created me for a purpose. Like, and of course, that's when I started to realize I lived through cancer for a reason. There's a reason I went through all that, and he has me here for a reason. And that's when I really began to have the scales peeled off of my eyes. I was blind before, but I started to see that I had meaning, and true love wasn't what I thought of. It's what he did for me. And this isn't plastered um, hallmark love. This is real. This is what real love is. That someone, and not just any someone, the God of the whole universe, came down to the earth, lived a perfect life, and he didn't just sit on a king's throne away from everybody, telling everybody what to do. He got dirty. He served everybody, and not just everybody, the worst people you could think of. He served them. He loved them, and guess what? He died for them, for not just them, for me. That's what I realized. He died for me. When someone loves you so much that they would sacrifice something for you, and not just something, their own life. Like Jesus sacrificed his life to save me, and not just that, he resurrected. He's the life. He brought something so dead for 3 days. He brought his dead body back to life. Thomas came over to him. He said, I don't believe it's you. You aren't really Jesus. He said, look at me. Look at the nail prints in my hands and the spear wound in my side. And he said, it's me. And I I finally began to realize that Jesus and God isn't just something that you learn with your head. Jesus is a person that wants to be invited into your heart and to change your life so you can live for him. And I when I started to realize that, um, I began to read the Gospels, believe it or not. And this wasn't for school. I did it for myself. And this is the first time I had ever done any kind of extensive Bible reading that wasn't for an assignment, it wasn't for a grade, it wasn't for looking better for my parents or family or friends, whatever, looking like I'm a holy Christian or anything like that. I did it to just see what living really is all about. Like when I was at rock bottom, I had nothing else to turn to, and I had no clue what living is really about till I looked till there, the Gospels, and I learned what love, real love, is. Um, so I read like 3 chapters a day. Uh, I started. I want to say it was early February in 2024 this year. So I read 3 chapters a day. Right, this was Matthew. You start in Matthew and the Gospels. I was gonna read at least the Gospels at this point, and I thought, well, if life truly has a purpose besides what I've gone through and what I've tried to experience, there has to be something in here that can show me what life really is. And not even not even 3 days in, it was the third day. Um, I felt the word begin to speak to me. Literally, it was so surreal. I have my notebook here, right? This is where I began to write notes for it. I'm gonna go back here, and so I wrote some notes. I was writing notes on all these three chapters I was doing, right? So I did 1, 2, 3, and then I did 3, 5, 6, or 4, 5, 6, and then the third day when I did Matthew 7, 8, and 9. This was part of the Sermon on the Mount that Jesus was doing. And in 8 and 9, Jesus began to talk about how in order to follow Jesus, you need to leave old things behind. Like I fully convinced myself. Satan convinced me that following Jesus, you could live the way you used to. Um, like deep down, I knew that wasn't the way, but I I convinced myself that it was. And reading through this, I realized that you need to, in order to follow Jesus, you have to leave some old things behind. And um, in Matthew chapter 9, verse 9, uh, Matthew, who's a tax collector at that time, it was like the most despised person or status you could have at all. And uh, Jesus, who was followed by a few disciples at this point, Jesus stopped in the middle of a crowd, looked at the tax collector, Matthew, in the eyes, and said, "Follow me." Now, how I felt about myself at this time was I'm like a tax collector. So I felt like I didn't have any worth or any kind of value at all. But Jesus, looking at his enemy, or what was considered his enemy, he looked in the eyes of him and he said, "Follow me." Now that that just hit me. And then the following verses, he says, "It's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick." And because people were criticizing Jesus for going up to a tax collector and saying uh, to follow me and eat with him and everything. And I'm like, Jesus really not just loves the righteous, he loves me so much that he died for me. Because of course I knew that he died, but he didn't just die, he died for me so I might be saved and be with him. It's so beautiful when you realize the weight of that. Um, and this is quote unquote what I said uh, leading up to that. Right after, um, I said I miss Friday, Saturday, and Sunday because of issues, and I'll explain that here in a second. But I hope to be re-spirited through this. I'm not going to take any notes today because I'm feeling like in this time it requires me to focus on listening. I was hit on Thursday by Matthew 8 and 9 through the verses that called his disciples to leave everything and follow him, which I decided I need to do in my own life. I knew this already, but I delayed it. Through that, he spoke to me and let me know it was time to leave old things behind and die. Now, in the absence, I will follow him as he calls me to, as much as I am in pain right now. So, this was the time where, through the power of the Holy Spirit, I finally left my relationship behind. As much as many people will say that relationship had no depth, it had a lot of depth to me, to my heart. And I realized it was finally, through the Holy Spirit, I realized it was finally time to let it go. And if it wasn't for Jesus, I would not have let that relationship go. It would have tormented me for years and years and years. And leaving that relationship was really painful. I remember feeling numb for days after, and many people think as soon as you start following Jesus, it's just so beautiful. But I felt numbness and pain because I knew what I had to do, but it wasn't out of work, you know, working to get closer to Jesus. It was because I knew Jesus died to save me, and if I was going to keep living for myself and for my passions, I didn't truly love him. And I um I continue to read the Gospel of Matthew, and this is the point where Jesus began to lift me up even after I was depressed and numb from leaving the relationship. Um, it was Matthew 16. So the next few days, I was just in pain and shock because of the importance I placed on my relationship. But now it was different because I had someone in my heart that died to save me. And it isn't just anybody, it's not just some person, it's the God of the universe. He came down, took on flesh, and he died to save me. It was an experience that I'll never forget. But even though I was going through so much pain after my breakup, I ran across this verse that was really profound. It's Matthew 16, verse 24 through 26. Uh, and Jesus told his disciples, "If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever will save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it." This is what Jesus used to give me peace, and that peace that I felt after knowing that I found my life in Jesus was it was so profound. I can't put it into words. And he gave me strength that I never knew. And this isn't for what I got out of beginning to following Jesus. This is about what true love is. True love is found in Jesus. That's it. There's no other option that is living and will sacrifice himself for you. And who has sacrificed himself for you? That's Jesus. And he took on all of our sin, all of our wrongdoing that we've ever done in our life, all of my wrongdoing, every time that I turned my back on him, every time I denied him, he took it all on that cross and he paid the debt that I deserved for it. And he's alive and I'm alive because of him, not because of what I've done or anything I could do. It's because of him. And now I live for him. And that's a peace that will surpass all understanding. Anything you ever experience in your life, that peace is it's amazing. My value now is not in something that changes, like the waves, they toss and they turn, and they're moved by the wind and they go back and forth. That's how my value was. My value was up and down and up and down and up and down. But now my value is unchanging. It's the God who is alive and who has always been and always will be. That's where my value lies. It's in him. It's not myself. It's not in any work that I can do. And this is something to say that the grace that God gave to us on the cross isn't because of how good we are, right? This is something that is it's 100% undeserved. We don't deserve any kind of grace or mercy, but because of how much he loves us, he died so that we might live with him. And it says this in Ephesians 2:8. For by grace you have been saved through faith. And this is not of your own doing. It is the gift of God, not the result of works, so that no one may boast. It's a free gift. This isn't something that you have to work towards. Jesus is always going to be at your door. He's not going to be barging through your door coming to say, hey, work for me, do this. He's going to be waiting for you right outside, and he will always be there for you. And I want to go back to, I used to carry so much guilt because I denied Jesus a few times, and the example I gave you wasn't the only time. But I'm in some good company. The Apostle Peter, if you don't know, before Jesus's death and trial, or before Jesus's death, he denied knowing Jesus 3 times, and after Jesus had resurrected in John chapter 21, Jesus asked him 3 times, Peter, do you love me? And 3 times Peter said yes. But this wasn't just to show that Peter loved him. It was to show that he wasn't going to deny Jesus anymore. Like, you can say you love someone, but in your heart, do you really love someone? It's completely different. When you have a gift like the grace of God, it's not how much work you can do to show how godly you are or how awesome you are. It's Jesus has changed my life. He's changed my heart. And now I want to live for him because he's done the work for me. He's paid the debt that I deserve. And it's so beautiful to know that all of the pain and the suffering that I experienced, and Jesus left the 99 to come and save me. And now that I know I'm saved and free, and my love is in something that's unchanging and will never leave me or forsake me. That love in Jesus. So by the grace of God, I've been free from my addiction since when this happened, February. All this happened. I've been free from my addiction to porn. It's I've obviously temptations will come, but my answer is free, and my answer is alive, and that's Jesus. That's the answer that I have, and Jesus has saved me from the pain and the guilt and the suffering and all of that I've gone through. I, he gave me peace that I can't explain. As I said at the beginning of the video, I'm not a preacher or a speaker or anything like that. The only thing I know is I'm a beggar on the side of the street who's found where living bread is. And of course, this isn't a story about how God fixes every single problem in your life. I mean, Jesus says, in this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world." And when you have an answer like Jesus, it breaks every chain that you feel you were bound to. Like I I struggle with these temptations every day. Like I always feel like I could fall back, but guess what? It doesn't matter what I feel. Jesus saved me, and Jesus is the one that guards my heart, and he will always be with me. He's he's my savior, he's a waymaker, he's the sacrificial lamb who freed me from being bound to that shame and that guilt and the sin that I was bound to for so many years. Um, and to anybody that's watching or listening to this, I promise you, Jesus is the true definition of love. There's no other thing in this world that will satisfy you. And this isn't just about satisfaction. This is about life. This is about what true love and life is, and that's in Jesus alone. I knew God loved me for my entire life with my brain, but I didn't love him. I loved the pleasures of the world. I loved what the world could give me. And every time I trusted me, they left me for dead. And anybody that's watching this, I know you've experienced that in your life. You've experienced trying to find satisfaction in anything else in this world, and it's left you for dead. I know you have. And that's what the gospel is. He died for you and for me to pay the penalty that we deserved for turning our backs on him. And even though we turned our backs on him and we denied him, he still endured all the pain and the death. They jammed a spear through his side, and blood and water came out. They didn't know medically what that meant in the first century, but that meant he was dead completely because the spear went through to his lung or his heart, and water and blood rushed out. He experienced death to show how much he loved us and to pay the price. That's what he did for us on the cross. And now we know in him we are no longer bound to guilt or shame or pain or or porn or temptations or sin or death. Any of that. We're no longer bound to it. We're free. We are free in him, and that's it. That's the gospel. And I want to live in my life in a way that shows glory to him, not to myself anymore. I want to live for Jesus, and in any way he calls me to do that, I want to be able to do that. And he will continue to work through me for the rest of my life. No matter what happens to me, I know that Jesus died for me. Jesus lives. He's alive. I don't know what Jesus is going to use this channel for, or if I'm even going to do anything related to this, but I know Jesus will guide me to spread the gospel and not just keep it to myself, because I know so many people out there. I know someone's watching this who's experienced the guilt and the pain and the shame that I felt. And I promise you, in Jesus, there's freedom. So I don't know how this is going to go in the future, but I'm going to take this time to pray that you guys might be blessed through this. Yeah, so let's go. Lord, you are great in mercy and forgiveness. You died not only to save me, but for everybody on this planet. I thank you for what you've done and what you will continue to do in the future, Lord. I pray that you would guide whoever's listening to watching this to you. I pray that your Holy Spirit would soften their hearts. You would send people their way to show the true love of Jesus. Lord, you sent your Son to the world not to condemn us or to shame us or to send us into guilt and work, but you sent your Son to die and love us and show us what true love is. Lord Jesus, pray that each day going forward, you would not only show this through my life, but every other person listening to this in their life too. Lord, I pray that you would free whoever's listening to this from their pain and their guilt and all the baggage that they carry, Lord. I pray that through you, the baggage will be lifted. Lord, I pray this in your name. Amen. Thank you guys for watching. I already told you I'm not experienced, but thank you. All right, peace.